glad to be with you this morning, and it's exciting when there's good news about teaching you the goodness of God's wrath. Did you come here today thinking, I'm so excited to learn about how wrathful God is? And yet, throughout the prophetic words of these Old Testament prophets, known as the minor prophets because of the size of the books, not the power of the message, we get to learn a lot about God's character. And today we're going to learn a few things in the books of Nahum and the book of Habakkuk. Each are 3 chapters long. I get thinking about doing them individually, but I think that there's a message that combines well in sharing these two with you today. How many of you have been recently just steadfastly into the book of Nahum or Habakkuk? Oh, okay, good. I was very shocked to see a response, to be honest. But I wanted to tell you today that this is a message for us that is relevant today. Sometimes we think of the Old Testament as a whole, and we think, how could that be relevant for us today? And I want to tell you, as we've been going through these past few weeks, through the minor prophets, it is essentially relevant for us to know what's in these books, because it impacts our lives. And I think you're going to see that in just very short words that we are going to go through this morning. As Nahum starts, we hear that it is a prophecy concerning Nineveh. So the book of Nahum is a word, a very strong word against a nation, the capital city of the Assyrian Empire. I know some of you are historically situated. You understand all of things history related, but for me as a math guy, I have to learn that. This isn't my nature to just go back and be excited about what happened all of those years ago. As much as I've been years into the word with being a pastor, but for me, to understand that Assyria was this grand power at the time that was destroying nations. They were violent. They were brutal. They were aggressive. There were no holds barred. And the capital of this empire was the city of Nineveh. And you'll remember this city because we talked a few weeks ago in the book of Jonah, where Jonah was given the instruction by God to go into the city of Nineveh and share an important message. It seemed to be a very brief message, but Jonah didn't want to share it because they were the enemy. And it was God, through Jonah and this message, that this nation, or this city specifically, was supposed to turn its ways around. Jonah went fleeing the other direction. He didn't want to share this good message with the people, but the short message that God ultimately had Jonah share with them is that if you don't turn, there will be destruction. And to his surprise, and our surprise perhaps, the nation turned itself around. They were sackcloth and ashes. They turned their lives to him again, and they decided that what they were doing was not good. This is about 100 or more years later that we're reading this book of Nahum, and things have turned upside down once again for the city of Nineveh. They've gone back to their old ways, and you think 100 years ago, generations go by. How many generations pass in 100 years? I don't know, 4, maybe 5. So in that time when your great-grandparents were living was a very different day than the day you're living in today. That makes sense. And what was happening now in Nineveh was like going back to their old ways, and God had had enough. A prophecy concerning Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum, the Elkoshite. We don't know where Elkosh was specifically. The city of Capernaum, interestingly enough, is called the village of Nahum. So some have an idea that that's where he was from. Nahum was from the city or village of Nahum, but we have no idea of that. That's a speculation, but it's a good speculation. But we don't know where he is from, but we do know that he has an important message, and here it comes. In verse 2, it says, "The Lord is a jealous and avenging God." Sit and rest in that for a moment. The Lord is a jealous and avenging God. The Lord takes vengeance and is filled with wrath. The Lord takes vengeance on his foes and vents his wrath against his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger, but great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. Let's just pause here for a moment. What have we just learned about God? That he is jealous. Now, this may be different than a jealousy that you or I might have in humanity, in that we are jealous of something that we don't have. But God, in his jealousy, is jealous for what he already has. It's like someone who is married, and you are jealous of the relationship that you are already in, that you are already connected with a spouse, and you are jealous when something happens to that spouse, or something stands in the way of your spouse, or, who knows, your children. I think there's an old British playwright that says something like, hell hath no fury, and that of a woman scorned. I think it was adjusted to a mother scorned at some point over the years, but you get the point. You put a mother and something in the way of a mother and her child, and there's going to be wrath. There's going to be such a jealousy that they cannot stand it any longer. They're so protective of that relationship, of that love relationship, and it demands exclusive devotion. There can be nothing that stands in the way. And so anything that stands against that relationship in God's eyes, anything that turns people away from that relationship, ultimately we know that that is sin. Well, God is on guard to that which already belongs to him. And so he's jealous. And not only is he a jealous God, but he is a avenging God. I didn't say revenging God. I said avenging God. Because there is a difference. To get revenge comes from a feeling or a motive of anger, of hatred. But to avenge is something different. To avenge means to come and fight for justice. Fight to bring things back to the way that they should be. And God has that heart. So I don't want us to get confused. He is jealous. He loves us so much. He wants to protect us. He wants to come and restore that relationship with us. He wants to eradicate anything that stands in the way of that relationship with us. And he is not a revenging God, but he is an avenging God. He is a God of justice. And so he does come with vengeance. He comes with wrath. And we just think it's this fire and brimstone and anger and God doesn't need, sometimes when we see the teeth baring, we think that it's an idea of how I can instill fear in you. God, on the other hand, doesn't need to scare you. He already is all-powerful. He already is over all things. He has full control. He doesn't need to convince you other than by saying, I am who I am. But he carries it out in the practice. He takes vengeance, and there's wrath involved. But we can be thankful that he is slow to anger. He is patient, and he is deliberate. He has such a long fuse. I just want you to imagine, as you probably saw in old cartoons, that there would be an explosive over here, and there would be this long strand over here. And something is lit, and we know that right now the fire is lit in this world. And there seems to be and we don't know where the flame is burning in the scope of the end and that explosive over there. But at some point, God's patience gets to a point at some point, and he gets to discern how long that fuse is. But it's long. And we can be thankful that it's long. But at some point, enough is enough. And so for Nineveh, enough was enough. It says in verse 6, who can withstand his indignation? Who can endure his fierce anger? His wrath is poured out like fire, and the rocks are shattered before him. This is an imagery. This is poetic imagery to show us just how powerful and just and jealous and avenging and good God is. Good. How could he be good? He's slow to anger because we know that he is measured and he's controlled and he's driven by love and justice because he is those things. He is love. He is justice. He is good. But at the end of the fuse, an explosion is waiting. But true love hates what destroys people. He loves people. He loves his people. He loves those who come and places faith in him, but he destroys anything that stands in the way, this sin, because he can't stand for that. He's a God not only of love, but of justice. You see, true love's opposite is not wrath. In fact, they're in tandem with one another when we hear God. The opposite of God's love would be God's apathy, his indifference, him not doing anything about it. But God's wrath is never out of control, and it's never selfish. God always has a plan in mind. And so he had a plan for this nation, this Assyrian Empire, this capital city of Nineveh, this great and powerful city that was doing destructive things. And he had a message through Jonah to share that message with them, and they were compliant for a time. But the generations passed, and he decided the time has come. Because I am just. Not only am I just, I am good. The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him. But the next word is but. But with an overwhelming flood, he will make an end to Nineveh. And Nineveh represents anything that is ongoing, consistently against the plan of God. Nineveh, it says in verse 11, plots evil against the Lord and devises wicked plans. This is what the Lord said. Although they have allies and are numerous, they will be destroyed and they will pass away. I want us to skip a little bit over to chapter 2, and you're just going to hear, and you don't have to follow along. I'm going to just highlight for you some of the things he's saying to Nineveh. Nineveh summons her picked troops, yet they stumble on their way. They were powerful. They were all powerful. They were the most powerful empire on the earth. And it is decreed that Nineveh will be exiled and carried away. Nineveh is like a pool whose water is draining away. She is pillaged, plundered, stripped. And this is the most disheartening word from the Lord, it seems. I am against you, declares the Lord. He is vengeance driven. He is wrathful. He is jealous against those who stand in the way of the ones he loves. I will burn up your chariots with smoke, and your sword will devour your young lions. The voices of your messengers will no longer be heard. This is the end. The fuse has reached its end. Woe to the city of blood. I am against you, declares the Lord. The fire will consume you. The sword will cut you down. King of Assyria, nothing can heal you. Your wound is fatal. And all who hear the news about you clap their hands at your fall, for who has not felt your endless cruelty? You don't have to go far in the news to realize that there are places in this world where people are doing things of injustice, that they are being unjust, that they are being cruel, they're being violent, they're going against what should be so that they can satisfy what they want to be. And some of us stand by and we think, is God doing anything? Is God doing anything in the midst of the chaos in this world? And this book should be so affirming for us. He is always on the watch. He knows exactly where the spark is lighting up on the fuse. What we don't know is how long the fuse is. And we don't get to choose. But God knows. And anyone who stands against him, nations, factions, groups, or individuals who are standing in the way of God's purpose on this earth, they will come to a place where they will have to meet God and his vengeance and his wrath. But here's the good news. The good news, it says in verse 7, the Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for him who trusts in him. In verse 12, although I have afflicted you, Judah, I will afflict you no more. He's talking collectively. Look, there on the mountains, it says in verse 15, the feet of the one who brings good news, who proclaims peace. We can look forward, and you can even hear this. That this is like the word of John the Baptist in the New Testament, who's bringing this good news that there is one coming. Celebrate your festivals, Judah, and fulfill your vows. No more will the wicked invade you, and they will be completely destroyed. The enemy will be destroyed. This is God's plan. And the Lord will restore the splendor, though destroyers have laid waste and have ruined the vines. It points us really to Jesus. It points us to the place where justice and mercy meet. We think about the cross, and we'll talk about this at the end, but at the cross, this is the perfect place for justice and mercy to meet. God has to be just. He has to inflict a wrath for the sin of this world. There has to be a punishment for the sin. Ultimately, it will come. But thankfully, although God is wrathful and just and good, he is loving and caring and merciful. And at the cross, we see that he brought a solution to that wrath through his own son, Jesus, so that we wouldn't have to pay that penalty. And so we do celebrate with festivals. We do restore ourselves to him, and he restores our splendor. We should live with this joy that he calls us to live despite our circumstances, which is emphatically shared in the book of Habakkuk. As we start that book, we see that he's now addressing not a nation that is pivotally against the ways of God and his people, like the Assyrians. The Assyrians' day would come. And if you don't know, the Assyrians' day would come at the hands of the Babylonian Empire. But I'm going to fast forward in the story. Guess what? The Babylonian Empire wasn't that much better. And at some time down the road, the fuse got short enough that the Babylonian Empire was taken care of. And if you go through the course of history, you'll know that every single empire that's ever lived, up to present day, and you can name even now, although we may not call them empires, there are powerful nations in this world who think that they are in control. But they are doing things against the Lord's hand. And guess what? They too shall have their day. But we can rejoice. But not yet. Not yet, because we have to read Habakkuk, because he's in the form of complaining. So we have to hear another little complaint here, and it's the same complaint that you and I have. He just verbalizes it to the Lord, and he says, "How long, Lord, must I call for help? But you don't listen." Have you ever said this? Have you ever said this? "Lord, surely you've just forgotten me, and you don't know my life. You're not watching what's happening in my life." And the first problem you have is you're saying it's my life. You're laying claim to this as if it's yours. Forgetting that, as we talked about already today, the miracle of birth, and the fact is that you were by God's grace given life. And somewhere along the journey, we think, oh, but it became ours. This is his. This is his. This face is his billboard. "How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you don't listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you don't save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing?" We say the same thing. "Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounding. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted." Now, to give you an understanding of what's happening here, Habakkuk is a prophet in Judah. So Judah just had their day of getting some reprieve from the Lord to hear that the empire that was overwhelming them was going to be taken over. That seemed like good news. But now we're forwarding a bit, and now Habakkuk is saying, why are we now getting the bad news? Why does it seem like nothing has really changed? Well, here goes. It's because nothing's really changed. And your heart is not for me. There's things going on in Judah that were just unjust. They were wrong. So they were pointing the finger to Assyria. They were pointing the finger to Babylonians, but they weren't looking at themselves. And Habakkuk is saying, it's not good here. It's not good here either. And there's injustice here, and the law isn't being watched here. And you're not doing anything about it. Why aren't you doing anything about it? And this is what the Lord says. A bit of a shocking response. "Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am doing something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. I'm raising up the Babylonians. Now you probably hear that and you go, I don't even know what that means. But as you read on, it says that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings, not their own. They are feared and dreaded. They are a law to themselves. They promote their own honor. They're fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong, and their horsemen come from afar, and they fly like the eagle swooping to devour, and they come with the intent of violence. And it goes on. These ungodly people God was about to use to take care of the justice or injustice in Judah. That wasn't the answer Habakkuk was looking for. I don't imagine it would be the answer you're looking for. You would want, if you were Habakkuk, to say, God, could you just do something about this terrible situation around me? The injustice that I see, I'm experiencing. God, I just want you to come in and go, poof. But he says, yeah, okay, well, I'm actually going to use the means by which you have no idea. You wouldn't even believe me if I told you. And you may not even believe me if I tell you. I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. I'm going to bring an even worse group of people in to deal with the justice in your land of Judah. So Habakkuk's response is, wait a second. I wrote that in. Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too evil or too pure to look on evil. You can't choose them. You can't tolerate wrongdoing. Why then would you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? Why are you using the Babylonians to take care of this issue? It doesn't need to be this way. So chapter 2 starts, and he says, I'm going to stand here at my watch. I'm going to be here at the watchtower. I'm going to wait for your word and response. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this one, God. Because this doesn't make sense to me. And the Lord answers in this way. He says in verse 2 of chapter 2, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. Which is another way of saying, make it on these tablets so big and so clear for everyone to read, hear, experience, that even if I was running by, I would catch the message. It'd be so obvious to me. And this is how obvious I want to make it to you, Habakkuk. And this is how obvious I want you to make it to the people who are listening to your message, Habakkuk. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of an end, and it will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it, and it will certainly come, and it will not delay. I have things under control, basically. In verse 4, it says, see, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by his faithfulness. This is the message that he wants to have shared. If you're righteous, you have nothing to fear. If you're in line with me, you have nothing to fear. You don't have to worry about my wrath. You don't have to worry about my jealousy. You don't have to worry about anything that I'm going to do that's going to harm other people or stand in the way. I care about you, and I care about my relationship with you. I'm so jealous for you that I want you to stand in line with me. And when you are righteous before me and we are living in that right relationship, you have nothing to fear. Just live by faith that I have things in control. And I think it's important for us in the chaos of our world to just satisfy our hearts with the good news of the Lord. As he's speaking to these two prophets, just understand that the Lord is in control, even in the chaos. And so he saw that the northern kingdom, his people, were falling out of line. And he said, the fuse is, it's used up. Kingdom in the north, I got to do something to get your attention because I love you so much. It's like a parent that says, I have to intervene. I've let it go for a long time. Sometimes as parents, we are long suffering. We are long suffering. That fuse is really long before we actually have to. We get to a place where we say we have to act. And God had to act in the lives of the people that he loved. And it just so happened in the northern kingdom that he used this powerful nation, Assyria, this evil, cruel, corrupt, brutal nation that had no holds barred. He used that nation to get the attention of his own people. And he's now doing that in the southern kingdom, the kingdom that he let to be in their place for a little bit longer. And now brings in this rough bunch of powerful, objective, standing in the way of relationship with God, people, the Babylonians, and now he's going to get the attention of the kingdom of Judah. They both get scattered. The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, they get scattered. It looks like it's full defeat. But it was only because he loved them so much that he wanted to gather their attention. There were some that would never get his attention. But he longed that some would. But he said, don't worry. I know this seems unfair, but I want to assure you of something. And now he goes through a series of 5 curses on Babylon. He said, don't worry about Assyrians. Nineveh, they got their day. Nahum explained very clearly that Nineveh had its day, and so will Babylon. And here's what we catch. It says in verse 6, it says, and there are five places where the word, in my Bible at least, uses the word woe. W-O-E. Verse 6, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion. There was such greed in Babylon. And they took into themselves, they would bring themselves to a place of wealth at the expense of others. Not only was there this greed, but there was injustice. In verse 9, we read, woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain. In verse 12, woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by injustice. So there was greed, there was injustice, there was violence, including slave labor. There was exploitation in verse 15. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. There was this exploitation of their enemies. There was shame and mockery. There was a robbing of dignity. And then finally, we see that there was in verse 19, woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to a lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It's covered with gold and silver. There is no breath in it. And so at this point, he's spoken very clearly against, and I want us not to miss, in case we think that we're not connected to Babylon, or that our nation is not connected to Babylon, do you think in our nation or in nations of the world that we see greed, that we see injustice, that we see violence, that we see exploitation, that we see idolatry? If we can learn anything from these 2 books this morning, is that God sees these things. And we know that God will deal with these things. The question we might ask ourselves is there anything like Babylon in us? Because we're not escaped from this. Habakkuk was saying, wait a second, we're your people. Why are we getting all of this punishment against us? He goes, because you're doing some of the very same things. You're an idolatrous people. I mean, if you look at the book of Ezekiel, you'll see all over that Israel is known as being very idolatrous. So we have to be careful in our own day and ask ourselves in the very small portions of our life, am I greedy? Have I ever lent myself to what is unjust? Have I ever been violent or oppressive? Have I ever exploited someone? Have I ever shamed or mocked someone or robbed someone of their dignity? Have I ever been idolatrous and felt like there was something else in this world that was more important than God? Well, he says in verse 20, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. And this is where the tone changes for Habakkuk. It's in the silence. It's in the revelation that we have, which is why we take time to pray, which is why we take time to hear his word and spend our time meditating on it. Because it says, as the book ends, in chapter 3, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I've taken this time to be silent before you, and I stand in awe of your deeds. Repeat them in our day, because you're glorious. You're full of splendor. You're full of power. You march on forever. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed ones. And the chapter and book ends with a song. Here's the song for us that we should be singing. If we have a heart like Habakkuk or an understanding like Nahum, in verses 17 to 19, though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in my God, my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. And it goes on to say that he's my stability. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer, and he enables me to tread on the heights. God is jealous. He's slow to anger. He's great in power. He is loving, but he is wrathful. And those are in tandem. Ultimately, he's divinely just. But the righteous have nothing to fear. It's with this song that I think that our hearts should be attending to the fact that in spite of the chaos that we see, our only job is to look at our own heart and trusting him, knowing that the righteous will live by faith. 3 illustrations came to mind to close, and they're just brief. That when you see perhaps a chessboard, maybe you're a chess player, or you've seen the game played. At the beginning of the game, all the pieces are neatly arranged, and it looks very polite. But partway through the game, there are a lot of moving of those pieces to the place where there's a battle. And there may even be a place where your opponent is making loud, aggressive moves from across the table. But if you're good at this game, and you're a master of the game, as it's called, maybe even a grandmaster, the grandmaster can see several moves ahead. And what might seem on the outside like a setback, or that the opposing player is going to win, is actually a setup for checkmate. And God is setting up. He's always going to win. He just sometimes takes more moves than we like. You may have seen a tapestry being woven, and if you look at the ones that are handmade, if you look at the back, they're a mess. You go, how can all this mess actually turn into anything? And then you flip it around and you see the beauty. And I think sometimes our perspective is always on the back where there's a mess. But forget that God is the grand weaver who's creating a beautiful design. And he has a plan. But the greatest illustration for us about what seems to be the opposition winning is at the cross. Where Christ on that day at Calvary, Good Friday, the darkness covered the region, the mocking, the jeering, the religious mob cheering as Jesus, the Son of God, hung lifeless on a cross. To everyone watching, it seemed like evil had won. But truth was silenced, and justice was crushed, and wickedness won the day. But the truth was that Friday felt like the end, but Sunday was coming. And God used the very worst act of human evil in history to accomplish the greatest act of eternal redemption. There are some people here. There are several categories of people here. But there may be a group of people here that I don't know, who God is very long-suffering when it comes to him wanting you to come to know him. But there will come a day when that fuse will hit the explosive. The spark will run along, and although it seems pleasant, there's nothing that's really happening. It looks very innocent. There's a day that's going to come when God, the just God, the wrathful God, the vengeance God, the God that loves, and the God that protects the ones he loves, will say, enough is enough. And you don't know if you have another day. And I don't usually get this aggressive, because I like to think lightly about life sometimes. But the reality is, the God who is just must oppose sin. And if you don't have this relationship with Jesus where you've accepted by faith his gift, where he stood and bore all the weight of our sin, every single sin, past, present, future, on his shoulders at the cross, where love and mercy meets wrath and justice, then there will be a day when you will stand before him and you will have no one who has paid the price for you, and you can't pay it. I would beg of you to give consideration to this thought, that you would be one who would say, enough is enough. And I want to surrender myself in the quietness to who God truly is. But then there are others in the room, and let's be honest, it can include you and me, who have been at times, wayward. We're relying on our past, but now we need to turn back to him and say, enough is enough, and I don't want to be greedy anymore. I don't want to be violent. I don't want to be mocking or shameful, or I don't want to be an idolatrous person who goes to another. I want to prove my allegiance. I want to return to you. By faith, your relationship with God can be restored, and that joy can be yours in this moment, even when, as the book reads, everything seems to be taken away. So whether you have I'm just going to the verse again. Whether you feel like there's no sheep in the pen, doesn't feel like there's any olives on the branches, it doesn't feel like there's any figs on the trees, it doesn't feel like there's anything producing here in my life because of all the evil that's all around me, all the injustice that seems to be around me. God is just. I feel like I've taken way much more time than I should have this morning to explain that, but I hope that it still speaks powerfully to you, and I want just to remind you of the power of the word from Old Testament to New. It has power today. Father, would you just bring us to a very clear knowledge of who you are? Would you just help us to know your character in and out? To not be confused by your long suffering, not to be surprised by your wrath and vengeance. May we truly understand that those are not opposites, but that it's because you deeply love us so. And so that verse that you just bring to us, it's not because we earned it. It's that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God, you so loved us that you sent your son, Jesus, so that we would not die but have everlasting life. And we want to claim that today. We love you, and we just want to respond to you. And so if your heart today is to respond to him, I pray that you will, with intent. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we're not going to sing another song, but we're just going to take a couple of minutes, and I know we still have a mic available, and we do this, and if, again, no one responds, that's fine. If someone responds, that's fine, but we're only going to take like less than 5 minutes to do this. But if you have a response to something you've heard today, or you feel God prompting on your heart, or drawing us to a different verse, preferably not the place where you stand up and point at me and say that was terrible, but, just don't shoot the messenger. But if there's something that you feel like you think is good for the group and you want to share with the group, then please, this would be the time to do that. So I'll just give opportunity for that. You may or may not have a response, but if something's on your heart, let's take a moment. What is God speaking to you this morning through that message from Nahum and Habakkuk?
You might be still processing, but